Today, let's take a look at the element of texture. Texture as an element of art can be especially powerful because it doesn't just engage the sense of sight, but also touch as well. There are two types of texture to be noted: actual and implied. When you're able to touch a piece and feel the texture, that's actual texture. Technically, all pieces of art have actual texture, even if it's a soft surface of a piece of paper, the chunky layers of a thick paint, or the bumpy edges of a collage. But most of the time, actual texture is referred to when the feel of the artwork is an important and less common choice made by the artist to add an additional element of dimension. Sometimes artists use the illusion of a drawn or photographed texture. You can't feel it, but the artist is relying on your past experience to simulate the idea or feeling of something, but if you actually touch it, you wouldn't be able to feel it. This is implied texture. Sometimes both actual and implied textures are being used simultaneously. A good example of this is Rauschenberg's piece Canyon. There are plenty of actual textures in this piece, like the soft feathers of the bird, the rough feel of the wood, but this piece also contains photographs with implied texture in them as well. There's a small child sitting in what looks like a pile of leaves. You can't actually feel the leaves, but the texture is implied. To study the difference between actual and implied textures further, we are going to add a little bit to our sketchbook. We will start by cutting a piece of paper in half. We will then fold each of those halves in half themselves. Later, we will be gluing these into our sketchbooks, but for now what we're going to do is prepare them to have two separate collages, one collage for actual texture and one collage for implied texture. We will start out by cutting out little windows. We will use the first sheet to make a collage full of actual textures. This can range from just about anything from natural objects to found items in your bag. Once you've completed this, you'll set it aside to dry. Then we'll start to work on the collage for the implied textures. We're going to use a combination of magazine clippings and drawings. You want to have at least 5 textures from magazines and at least 3 drawings of textures. Once you have glued them all on and combined them together, you'll set that one aside to dry. You'll then go back to your actual textures and just clean up the edges, making sure that nothing is hanging over. Now we can go ahead and glue in the back side of each collage into the sketchbook. At this point, we're going to create the front label that shows us which element of art we're talking about and the difference between actual and implied texture. Once we've created the cover, we're just about done. It's pretty chunky and it might look a little bit rough, but in the end, being able to have this reference to look back to will help us to create art that's smoother than shaved legs and fresh sheets.